25 black celebrities who were killers you didn't know about. Today, on Legends of Black Excellence, we're stepping into the shadow behind the spotlight. These aren't internet rumors or gossip. These are real cases where black celebrities were linked to killings that changed lives forever. Some were found guilty. Some were cleared. Some say it was self-defense or a terrible mistake. But the result is always the same. Someone died, and fame couldn't rewind time. So before you scroll away, ask yourself, how well do we really know our icons? Subscribe now, hit like, and stay to the end, because this list might challenge everything you think you know. Michael Jace. Michael Jace lived for years in that middle tier of Hollywood recognizable, reliable, and rarely tabloid famous. On FX's acclaimed drama The Shield, he portrayed Detective Julian Lowe from 2002 to 2008, delivering a grounded performance that earned him steady work and quiet respect. To many fans, he was the kind of actor you trusted, not flashy, but real. Off-camera, he was a husband and father raising 2 boys with his wife April. Yet on the night of May 19, 2014, that ordinary picture collapsed. After a tense confrontation at their Los Angeles home, Jace retrieved a .40 caliber handgun and fired at April, killing her inside the living room while their children were present. In the immediate aftermath, he did not flee. Instead, he phoned emergency services and confessed. If you heard this story without the name, would you guess it involved a TV actor? Investigators and prosecutors described a relationship strained by suspicion and possessiveness, arguing the shooting was the end point of a dangerous pattern rather than a random burst of temper. His attorneys tried to cast it as an impulsive tragedy, but the courtroom evidence and testimony persuaded the jury otherwise. In 2016, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years to life in California prison. The entertainment career that once seemed stable disappeared in a single verdict, replaced by a future measured in parole hearings and locked doors. Beyond the headlines, the deepest wound belongs to the family left behind, especially 2 sons forced to carry an unbearable memory into adulthood. The case stands as a stark warning: fame can mask fractures, but it cannot shield anyone from the consequences of violence. Charles S. Dutton. Charles S. Dutton's path to becoming a celebrated performer is one of the sharpest turnarounds in modern American entertainment. He was born in Baltimore in 1951 and grew up in a world where fights were common and futures felt narrow. As a teenager, he got pulled into street life, and at 16, a confrontation ended with a fatal stabbing. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter in 1967. After a brief release, more trouble followed, sending him back into the system. By the time he finally walked out for good in the mid-1970s, he had spent more than 7 years behind bars. Prison could have frozen him in that identity, but instead, it sparked a reinvention. While confined, he discovered literature and stage work, joined a small inmate drama group, and began to picture himself differently. He completed his education, then pursued acting seriously after release, first earning a degree at Towson University and later training at Yale's drama school. That uncommon discipline fueled a rapid rise. Broadway audiences took notice in August Wilson's Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, where Dutton's intensity earned major awards and nominations. Film roles soon followed, including memorable turns in Alien 3, Menace II, Society, and A Time to Kill. Television made him familiar to millions when he starred as Rock Emerson in Fox's Rock during the early 1990s, bringing a raw, grounded realism that felt lived in rather than performed. Dutton has never hidden the weight of his past. Instead, he has framed it as a warning and a motivation. His story doesn't excuse a life taken, but it shows how a man once defined by a blade found purpose through art, responsibility, and hard-won growth. Felicia Snoop Pearson. Felicia Snoop Pearson's rise to television fame is inseparable from a childhood shaped by abandonment and street survival. Born in Baltimore in 1980 to parents battling addiction and incarceration, she entered life fragile and unwanted, then grew up in East Baltimore foster care, where violence and drug trade were everyday facts. By her early teens, she was running with older dealers carrying a gun, long before she understood what a future could look like. In April 1995, at only 14, Pearson shot and killed a girl named Okia Toomer during a neighborhood dispute. She was convicted of second-degree murder in juvenile court and received 2 consecutive 8-year terms. She ultimately served about 6.5 years and was released in 2000, still barely an adult, but already marked by a serious conviction. Do you believe someone can truly change after taking a life so young? Freedom didn't instantly mean safety or stability. Pearson struggled to find legitimate work and stayed close to the same streets that had nearly swallowed her. The turning point came through a chance meeting. Actor Michael K. Williams encountered her in a Baltimore club and was struck by her blunt honesty and presence. He introduced her to the team behind HBO's The Wire, and she landed the role of Felicia Snoop Pearson, an enforcer whose cold precision felt terrifyingly real because it was rooted in lived experience. She appeared on the series from 2004 to 2008 and became one of its most unforgettable figures. Later, she told her story in the memoir Grace After Midnight, framing her life as a warning as much as a comeback. Pearson's journey is messy, unsettling, and rare. A woman who crossed a terrible line early, survived the system, then became art that forced America to look at the streets it often ignores. C. Murder. Corey C. Murder Miller came up out of New Orleans during No Limit Records' late 90s explosion, standing beside his older brother Master P as the label turned Southern rap into a national force. His music leaned hard into street realism. Albums like Life or Death made him a recognizable voice to fans who saw him as gritty and authentic. But the night of January 12, 2002 rewrote his story. At the Platinum Club in Harvey, Louisiana, a fight broke out inside the packed venue. 16-year-old Steve Thomas, who had come to see his idol, was shot once in the chest and died. Miller was arrested days later and charged with second-degree murder. The legal path stretched for years and became one of hip-hop's most debated cases. A jury convicted him in 2003, but Louisiana's Supreme Court threw that verdict out in 2006, ordering a new trial. While awaiting retrial, he lived under strict house arrest. In May 2009, he entered a no-contest plea in an unrelated Baton Rouge nightclub incident from 2001, receiving a 10-year sentence for attempted murder charges. Only months later, his retrial for Steve Thomas's death ended in another conviction in August 2009. A 10-2 jury found him guilty again, triggering Louisiana's mandatory life without parole sentence. Since then, witnesses have recanted, supporters have claimed a setup, and multiple appeals have been filed. Federal courts upheld the conviction in 2023, and another major appeal was denied in 2024. As of now, C. Murder remains incarcerated at Louisiana State Penitentiary at Angola, a lasting symbol of how quickly a music legacy can be eclipsed by one violent, contested night. Don King. Don King is remembered by most Americans as the loud, electrifying impresario who turned boxing matches into world events. The hair, the grin, the booming voice, he sold drama as well as punches, steering careers for icons like Muhammad Ali, George Foreman, and Mike Tyson. Yet long before the limousines and pay-per-view millions, King moved through Cleveland's underground economy as a numbers banker and hustler. That earlier life carried a violence many fight fans never knew. In April 1966, King confronted Sam Garrett, a man who owed him money on a Cleveland street. What followed was not a scuffle that got out of hand, but a brutal beating described by witnesses as relentless punches, kicks, and a pistol used like a club. Garrett died from his injuries. King was charged with murder, but the case was reduced to second-degree manslaughter, and he served about 4 years in prison. If this had been someone without money or connections, would the outcome have looked the same? After his release in 1971, King rebuilt himself with astonishing speed. He leveraged community ties and political relationships, then stepped into boxing promotion during an era hungry for spectacle. The 1974 Rumble in the Jungle and the 1975 Thrilla in Manila cemented him as the sport's master showman. Over the decades, he negotiated some of the richest purses in boxing history, while also facing frequent accusations from fighters who claimed he skimmed earnings or manipulated contracts. Many still see him as both genius marketer and ruthless operator. King's story is a sharp reminder that reinvention can be real, but it doesn't erase what came before. His legacy sits forever between two worlds, one built on glory, the other on a life taken. O.J. Simpson. Orenthal, James O.J. Simpson, was once the picture of American success. A Heisman-winning USC running back, an NFL Hall of Famer, a pitchman with a megawatt smile and a Hollywood crossover who seemed to glide from stadiums to movie sets. By the early 1990s, he wasn't just famous. He was familiar, the kind of household name people trusted. That's why the night of June 12, 1994, struck like an earthquake. His ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, 35, and her friend Ronald Goldman, 25, were found brutally stabbed outside Nicole's Brentwood condominium. Within days, Simpson became the prime suspect. On June 17th, he fled in a white Ford Bronco while police pursued him live on television. An estimated 95 million Americans watched the slow-speed chase in real time. The criminal trial that began in January 1995 became a national obsession wrapped in questions about race-policing celebrity and domestic violence. On October 3, 1995, the jury found him not guilty. Yet the story did not close there. In a separate civil case, a different jury ruled in February 1997 that he was responsible for both deaths and ordered him to pay $33.5 million in damages. The judgment followed him for the rest of his life, with interest swelling the debt. Years later, in 2008, he went to prison in Nevada for an unrelated armed robbery and kidnapping case, serving 9 years before parole. Simpson died in Las Vegas on April 10, 2024, at age 76 from metastatic prostate cancer. His legacy remains one of America's most painful riddles: adored icon, acquitted defendant, civilly liable figure, forever contested, forever remembered. Cool C. Christopher Cool C. Roney was a major voice in late 1980s Philadelphia rap, known for streetwise storytelling and his hit Glamorous Life. He wasn't a fringe figure, he was part of the city's hip-hop identity, touring, releasing albums, and building a name that felt permanent. But on January 2, 1996, that promise collapsed during a bank robbery that turned fatal. Authorities say Cool C and several associates entered a PNC bank branch in Feltonville, planning a quick cash grab. When police arrived, chaos erupted. Officer Laretha Baird, a mother and veteran officer, was shot in the head and died at the scene. Investigators linked the crime to Cool C through surveillance footage, witness testimony, and physical evidence, and he was arrested the next day. How quickly do you think fame disappears when a life is lost? The trial painted the robbery as organized, not impulsive. Prosecutors argued that Cool C was the shooter. The defense insisted the evidence was shaky, and the state relied too heavily on informants. Still, in 1997, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to death, one of the rare rappers to land on death row for a police killing. His co-defendants received life terms. For years, appeals moved through state courts, but the conviction held. In 2015, Pennsylvania's governor placed a moratorium on executions, so Cool C's sentence remains in limbo, still legally death row, but without a scheduled execution date. His story is a stark Philadelphia tragedy, an artist who once rapped about survival, now spending decades in a cell because a robbery ended with a uniformed officer dead. It's the kind of fall that leaves listeners asking whether the music was prophecy, performance, or both. Suge Knight. Marion Suge Knight was once the towering, fearsome architect of West Coast hip-hop's golden age. As co-founder of Death Row Records in the early 1990s, he helped launch careers that defined a generation: Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac Shakur, while turning rap into a mainstream business juggernaut. To fans, he looked like the ultimate power broker, larger than life, always near the center of the music's most electric moments. But his reputation for intimidation followed him as closely as his success did, and by the 2010s, the empire had crumbled into lawsuits, bankruptcy, and a long trail of violent allegations. Everything came to a head on January 29, 2015 in Compton. Knight drove a red Ford F-150 into a restaurant parking lot during a confrontation connected to the film Straight Outta Compton. In the chaos, he struck two men. Cleabone Sloan survived, but Terry Carter, a longtime friend, was fatally run over. Security footage captured the entire incident. Prosecutors said Knight used the truck as a weapon. His lawyers argued he was trying to escape an attack. After years of delays, changing attorneys, and mounting evidence, Knight chose a plea deal. In September 2018, he pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter, avoiding a murder trial that could have sent him away for life. The court sentenced him to 28 years in California state prison, including extra time under the three strikes law. Efforts to overturn the sentence have failed, leaving him incarcerated with a projected release date far in the future. Knight's story is a brutal cautionary tale. A man who once controlled an entire sound and then lost everything in a single, irreversible act of violence. Jason Williams. Jason Williams, often called white chocolate by fans, was a dazzling NBA point guard whose flair felt made for highlight reels. By 2002, he had moved past his Sacramento breakthrough years and was trying to steady his career and personal life in New Jersey. Away from arenas, though, he had a fascination with firearms that friends later described as casual and careless. On the night of February 14, 2002, in his mansion in West Orange, he hosted a late gathering with alcohol flowing. At some point, he handled a Browning 12-gauge shotgun, reportedly attempting to show it was unloaded. The weapon discharged, striking his longtime limousine driver, Kostas Gus Christofi, in the chest, and killing him almost instantly. Panic followed. Instead of calling authorities, Williams and others tried to reshape the scene, moving the gun and wiping surfaces, actions that became central to the case. If a split-second mistake happens in your home, do you face it or try to hide it? Prosecutors first charged him with reckless manslaughter, then upgraded to aggravated manslaughter and evidence tampering. The legal process dragged for years with mistrials and appeals. In 2004, he was acquitted of the most serious homicide counts, but the tampering charge stuck. A retrial in 2010 ended with Williams pleading guilty to reckless manslaughter for the shooting and to attempting to cover it up. The court sentenced him to 5 years, yet he served about 18 months before release. His NBA journey never truly recovered. Sponsorships evaporated, and his name became tied less to ankle-breaking passes than to one tragic night. The Williams case sits at the intersection of ego, guns, and fear of consequences, showing how a single careless moment can erase an entire public identity. Turk. Tab Virgil Jr., better known as Turk, broke out of New Orleans as part of the Hot Boys riding the first great wave of Cash Money records beside Lil Wayne, Juvenile, and BG. His raspy, no-frills delivery made him feel closest to the block, and fans heard real hunger in his verses. At the peak of that momentum, a single afternoon in Memphis rerouted his life. On January 26, 2004, a SWAT team stormed an apartment connected to narcotics and illegal weapons. In the confusion of the entry, Turk fired a 9mm pistol. One officer was struck in the chest and died at the scene. Police reported finding heroin, cocaine, and multiple guns inside the residence, and Turk was arrested on the spot. In court, the prosecution insisted he knowingly shot at law enforcement. Turk's defense argued the opposite, that he thought it was a home invasion and reacted out of panic. The jury sided with the state. In 2005, he was sentenced to a long stretch that the transcript frames as 10 years for armed assault plus 14 for manslaughter, a punishment that effectively erased his mainstream career. After nearly a decade behind bars, he was released in 2012. Since returning home, Turk has tried to rebuild through independent music and interviews, but the case remains welded to his legacy. His story is a harsh lesson in how a few seconds, especially around guns, fear, and bad environments, can cost a life and transform a star into a cautionary tale. Chi Ali Griffith looked like one of hip-hop's brightest kid prodigy stories. Raised in the Bronx and signed while still in his early teens, he landed on national radar with the fabulous Chi Ali in 1992, rapping with the kind of youthful spark that made older artists treat him like the next big thing. For a moment, everything lined up: videos, tours, magazine covers, and a future that seemed already written. But adulthood hit fast and rough, and the glow around him didn't soften the streets he still lived in. On January 14, 2000, a dispute in the Bronx spiraled into gunfire. Shaquille Shaw Simpson, reported to be his girlfriend's brother-in-law, was shot and died from the wounds. Witness accounts and investigators tied the shooting to Chi Ali, and he vanished. A year of hiding followed, moving between cities, changing his appearance, slipping ahead of each lead. If you were 23 and terrified, would you run or turn yourself in? That flight ended on March 5, 2001, when federal agents captured him in Yonkers, New York. Facing serious charges, he chose a plea deal. In 2002, he admitted to first-degree manslaughter and received a 14-year sentence. He served roughly 12 years before his 2012 release. Since coming home, Chi Ali has tried to rebuild quietly, returning to music in smaller spaces and speaking openly about regret and wasted time. His story lands like a warning for every young star: talent can open doors, but it can't protect you from the weight of one violent decision or the years it takes to live with it. Shine. Jamal "Shine" Barrow arrived in hip-hop as a teenage prospect with a rough, memorable voice and a Bad Boy Records contract at the exact moment that label dominated the culture. His first album hit shelves in 2000 and went gold within weeks, setting him up as one of the crew's next stars. But the story pivoted on a single winter night. On December 27, 1999, Shine joined Sean "Diddy" Combs and Jennifer Lopez at Club New York in Manhattan. A heated argument broke out, gunfire erupted, and 3 bystanders were struck by bullets. The chaos sent the city and the music world into a media storm that followed Shine straight into court. At trial, prosecutors said Shine fired into the crowd. Defense witnesses argued there was confusion and possibly more than one shooter. In June 2001, the jury cleared him of attempted murder, but found him guilty of assault, reckless endangerment, and illegal gun possession. He received a 10-year prison sentence and served a little over 9 years. While incarcerated, he kept recording, converted to Orthodox Judaism, and legally changed his name to Moses Michael Levi Barrow. When he walked free on October 6, 2009, immigration authorities immediately detained and deported him to Belize. Back in his birth country, Shine's reinvention was dramatic. He became a public figure, won the Mesopotamia parliamentary seat in 2020, and rose to lead Belize's United Democratic Party. From February 2022 to March 2025, he served as leader of the opposition. Today, his life stands as a rare arc, a rising rapper halted by a nightclub shooting, then reshaped into a national political leader. Ray Lewis. Ray Lewis built his name as the heartbeat of the Baltimore Ravens, an aggressive, emotional linebacker who played like every snap was a personal mission. By January 2000, he was already a Super Bowl champion and one of the league's most recognizable faces. Then, in the early hours of January 31, 2000, just after the Ravens' Super Bowl 2018 celebration, a confrontation outside Atlanta's Cobalt Lounge in Buckhead turned into a deadly brawl. 2 young men, Jacinth Baker, 21, and Richard Lawler, 24, were stabbed to death. Lewis and members of his entourage were present, and they left the scene quickly in a limousine. Police soon focused on Lewis, along with Reginald Oakley and Joseph Sweeting, indicting all 3 men on charges that included malice murder and felony murder. When a sports hero is caught in a moment like this, do you judge the man or wait for the courtroom? The case exploded into a national storm. One detail shadowed everything: the white suit Lewis wore that night, reportedly stained with blood, was never recovered. Investigators believed it had been discarded to conceal evidence. Lewis denied any role in the stabbings. Forensics never produced DNA or fingerprints tying him to a weapon. As trial neared, prosecutors faced major holes in their murder case. On June 5, 2000, Lewis accepted a plea deal. He pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor obstruction of justice charge for giving misleading statements to police and agreed to testify against Oakley and Sweeting. In return, all murder and aggravated assault charges against him were dropped. Oakley and Sweeting were later acquitted for lack of evidence. Lewis received 1 year of probation, a fine, and community service, then returned to the NFL, won another Super Bowl, and entered the Hall of Fame. Still, that Atlanta night remains stitched into his legacy. To some, he was a witness who panicked. To others, the missing suit and plea leave questions that never quite fade. Ray Caruth. Ray Caruth was supposed to be one of the NFL's next breakout wide receivers. Drafted by the Carolina Panthers in 1997, he had speed, smooth route running, and the kind of early promise that makes teams dream big. But his career ended not with a torn ligament, but with a planned act of violence that stunned the country. In late 1999, Caruth's girlfriend, Sherika Adams, was 8 months pregnant. According to prosecutors, Caruth wanted no part of fatherhood or the financial responsibilities that came with it. On the night of November 16, 1999, after the two left a movie in Charlotte, Caruth drove ahead of Adams on a dark road, then slowed and blocked her car. Another vehicle pulled alongside her. Shots were fired into Adams' car, striking her 4 times. She survived long enough to call 911 and name Caruth as the man who set her up. Caruth fled, hiding in a friend's trunk when police found him days later. At trial, the state argued he had hired a hitman, Van Brett Watkins Sr., for $3,000, coordinating the ambush with phone records and witness testimony. In 2001, a jury convicted Caruth of conspiracy to commit murder, shooting into an occupied vehicle and using an instrument to destroy an unborn child. He was acquitted of first-degree murder but received a sentence of 18 to 24 years. Sherika Adams died on December 14, 1999, after 4 weeks in the hospital. Their son, Chancellor Lee Adams, was delivered by emergency C-section, survived, but suffered lasting brain damage from oxygen loss. Caruth was released in 2018. He has spoken about regret and wanting a relationship with his son, but the case remains one of the NFL's bleakest reminders that some choices can't be outrun. Donald Jones. Donald Jones is a good example of why say no to fake news matters with lists like this. He's a Chicago-born R&B singer best known for the late 90s and early 2000s run that gave audiences You Know What's Up and the album Where I Wanna Be. Over nearly 3 decades, his public record has been closely tracked, and there is no verified court case linking him to a killing, a fatal DUI, or any manslaughter conviction. The transcripts claim that he caused a deadly drunk driving crash in 2001 appears to be a mistaken or fabricated add-on, likely mixing him up with another person who shares the same name. In reputable biographies and mainstream reporting, that event simply doesn't exist. When you hear a shocking allegation online, do you pause to check where it came from? What is documented is different and far less sensational. Jones has spoken about growing up around gangs on Chicago's South Side and getting arrested for armed robbery as a teenager, a period he describes as a wake-up call that pushed him toward music. In recent years, the only widely reported incident involving him and a vehicle was a non-fatal crash he openly admitted to causing after falling asleep at the wheel. An exhaustion mistake, not a crime, and thankfully one that harmed no one else. He continues to tour and release music with no credible legal history, placing him in any homicide narrative. So if your goal is accuracy, Donald Jones shouldn't be framed as a killer you didn't know about. His real story is about early life trouble, artistic success, and the importance of separating viral claims from provable facts. G. Depp. Travell G. Depp Coleman never fit the glossy bad boy fairy tale. Raised in Harlem, he came up in the late 90s under Sean Diddy Combs with a restless edge that spilled into his music. His 2001 album, Child of the Ghetto, gave him a brief, real moment in the spotlight. Many people knew the hooks before they knew the story behind the voice. But long before radio play and music videos, there was a violent secret he carried alone. On October 19, 1993, when Coleman was 19, he tried to rob a man outside the James Weldon Johnson houses in East Harlem. During the struggle, he fired a .40 caliber handgun, striking 32-year-old John Henkel in the chest. Henkel later died, and the case went unsolved for years. Coleman disappeared back into life, then into music, while the homicide file collected dust. 17 years passed. Fame cooled. Guilt didn't. On December 15, 2010, Coleman walked into an NYPD precinct and confessed, offering details detectives were able to match to the cold case. The admission stunned the city and the music world because nothing forced his hand. He came on his own, saying he couldn't keep living with what he'd done. He was arrested, tried, and convicted of second-degree murder in 2012, receiving a sentence of 15 years to life. In prison, he pursued education and spoke often about conscience, remorse, and choosing truth over freedom. Then, in a rare twist, his sentence was commuted in late 2023, making him eligible for parole, and he was released in April 2024 after serving a little over 13 years. G. Depp's story isn't about getting away with anything. It's about one violent moment echoing across decades and the strange, painful power of guilt that finally brought him back to the scene not as an artist, but as a man ready to face what he did. Big Lurch. Antron Singleton, known in rap circles as Big Lurch, came out of Dallas with a heavy, horror-tinged style that earned him a cult following rather than mainstream stardom. He recorded with the group Cosmic Slop Shop, then moved to Los Angeles chasing a bigger break. Friends later described him as talented but unstable, sliding deeper into drug use. That instability turned catastrophic on April 10, 2002. After smoking, PCP Singleton returned to the apartment he shared with 21-year-old roommate Tynesha Isais and her boyfriend. What happened next was so extreme it still reads like a nightmare. Isais was found dead with her chest torn open, severe bite marks on her face, and organs removed. Investigators said part of a lung had been eaten. When police located Singleton nearby, he was naked, blood-covered, and disoriented. Medical tests later reported human tissue in his stomach. When drugs hijack someone's mind, where do you think responsibility begins and ends? At trial, the defense argued he was in a psychotic state and pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. Prosecutors countered that voluntary intoxication, no matter how severe, does not excuse a killing under California law. In June 2003, a jury found him guilty of murder and aggravated mayhem. On November 7, 2003, the judge imposed life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His music, released later through label decisions, couldn't change the public image forged by the crime. Big Lurch's case is now cited not as a story of celebrity excess, but as a grim warning about PCP's capacity to trigger violent delirium and about how one brutal night can turn an artist into a lifetime inmate. Gucci Mane. Radrick Gucci Mane Davis helped shape Atlanta's trap sound into a national language, turning street diaries into club anthems and building a loyal audience long before mainstream respect arrived. In the mid-2000s, while his music was exploding, his real life collided with a deadly episode that still shadows his name. On May 10, 2005, Davis was at a house in Decatur, Georgia, when a group of men forced their way inside. A fight broke out almost immediately. According to Davis, he feared for his life, grabbed a gun, and fired while trying to protect himself and the people with him. One of the men, rapper Henry Pookie Lock Clark, connected to a long-running feud in Atlanta's rap scene, was killed. His body was later discovered nearby, and the story ricocheted through hip-hop like a thunderclap. Gucci Mane turned himself in on May 19, 2005, and was charged with murder. The case became a public test of self-defense, celebrity pressure, and street politics. After months of investigation, prosecutors said the evidence wasn't strong enough to prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt. In January 2006, the charge was dropped. Legally, Davis walked free. Culturally, the fallout lingered. The death intensified his rivalry with young Jeezy, fed years of threats in lyrics and interviews, and helped normalize the ugly trend of dissing the dead in rap, something Gucci himself has later expressed regret about. His story sits in that uneasy space where the courtroom ends, but the moral debate doesn't. Was it survival in a terrifying moment, or a preventable tragedy born from a violent environment? Either way, that night remains the hard edge of his legacy. Cassidy. Barry Cassidy Reese came out of Philadelphia with battle rapper confidence and a radio-ready punch, becoming one of the early 2000s voices that could move from street corners to Billboard in a blink. By spring 2005, he was riding real momentum. His album I'm a Hustler was on the way, and his profile was rising fast. Then April 15, 2005 changed the trajectory. That night in West Oak Lane, a heated argument escalated into a gunfight. Investigators said 3 armed men, including Cassidy, opened fire on 3 unarmed men. Desmond Hawkins, 22, was struck in the back and died. 2 others were wounded but survived. The scene wasn't framed as a studio-era beef. It was presented as an actual neighborhood shootout with a fatal outcome. When success is finally within reach, how do you think a young star handles sudden fear and pride? A warrant was issued on June 9, 2005, charging him with first-degree murder and related offenses. Cassidy surrendered to police on June 17 and was held without bail while the case unfolded. Over the following months, key testimony wobbled, and the prosecution's original theory weakened. Instead of a jury trial, Cassidy chose a bench trial, placing the decision in a judge's hands. On January 25, 2006, he was found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, 2 counts of aggravated assault, and possession of an instrument of crime. The sentence, 11.5 to 23 months in prison, plus probation with credit for time already served. He was released on March 2, 2006, after roughly 8 months behind bars. Cassidy returned to music soon after, but the case remains a permanent mark. A reminder that one violent night can shrink a career's horizon no matter how bright the spotlight once looked. Vybz Kartel. Adidja Palmer, better known as Vybz Kartel, was already a giant in Jamaican dancehall before his legal battle turned him into an international headline. By the late 2000s, he wasn't just a hitmaker. He was a cultural force with a loyal base that treated his music like daily news. That power made the accusation against him in 2011 feel seismic. Prosecutors said Kartel and 3 co-defendants were involved in the killing of Clive Lizard Williams, an alleged associate who disappeared in Kingston on August 16, 2011. No body was ever recovered, but investigators relied heavily on witness testimony, phone records, and a string of controversial text messages that were read in court. In March 2014, after a marathon 65-day trial, a Jamaican jury convicted Kartel of murder. He received a life sentence widely reported as requiring decades before parole eligibility. For years, he insisted he was innocent while supporters called the case corrupt and politically tainted. Kartel's health declined in prison. He was diagnosed with Graves' disease and repeatedly sought medical relief. Yet he remained musically active, releasing songs and albums from behind bars. Then came the legal reversal that changed everything. On March 14, 2024, the UK Judicial Committee of the Privy Council overturned the convictions, ruling that juror misconduct had made the original trial unsafe. Jamaica's Court of Appeal later decided not to order a retrial, and Kartel was released on July 31, 2024, after about 13 years in custody. Since regaining freedom, he has returned to public life, fast announcing and performing on his World Boss 2025 tour across the Caribbean, the US, and Europe, and releasing new music that frames his comeback as survival and vindication. Kartel's story now sits in a complicated place. A man once legally labeled a killer, later freed because the trial itself was judged unfair, stepping back on stage while debate over the original crime still hangs in the air. Conrad Murray. Conrad Murray entered the public eye not as an entertainer, but as the physician hired to keep the world's biggest pop star on his feet. Born in Grenada in 1953 and trained in the United States as a cardiologist, Murray built clinics in Nevada and Texas, and by 2009 agreed to become Michael Jackson's personal doctor for the planned This Is It comeback shows. The job reportedly promised $150,000 a month, and Murray moved into Jackson's Los Angeles orbit just weeks before everything fell apart. On June 25, 2009, Jackson was discovered unresponsive at his home and was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. The Los Angeles County coroner ruled the death a homicide caused by acute propofol intoxication with additional sedatives in his system. Investigators said Murray had been giving propofol in a bedroom setting as a sleep aid without proper monitoring equipment and outside standard medical practice. Murray maintained Jackson had asked for the drug and claimed the singer may have self-administered after he left the room. When you hear Dr. Error, do you think mistake or betrayal? In 2011, a jury convicted Murray of involuntary manslaughter. The judge imposed the maximum sentence for that charge, 4 years in county jail. Due to California's overcrowding rules and good behavior credits, he served just under 2 years and was released on October 28, 2013. His medical licenses were suspended or revoked in multiple states, effectively ending his U.S. career. After release, he continued to deny criminal responsibility, gave interviews defending his actions, and later pursued medical work in the Caribbean, including Trinidad and Tobago. Murray's case remains a stark lesson in how one patient, one risky decision, and one night of negligence can echo across medicine, music, and memory forever. Josh Brent. Josh Brent was never the loudest star on the Dallas Cowboys, but he was a powerful presence on the defensive line. A 7th-round supplemental pick in 2010, he fought his way into real playing time by 2012, becoming close friends with teammate Jerry Brown Jr. Off the field, though, Brent had already shown warning signs. A prior DUI from 2009 sat on his record. Then came the night that defined him. In the early hours of December 8, 2012, after a night out, Brent drove his Mercedes S600 on a frontage road near Dallas at extreme speed. Investigators estimated at least 110 mph, possibly up to 134 on a stretch posted around 45. The car clipped a curb, flipped, and burst into flames. Brent escaped, but Brown was trapped and died in the fire. A breath test later put Brent's blood alcohol level at about 0.18, more than twice Texas's legal limit. The case was tried as intoxication manslaughter. In January 2014, a jury found Brent guilty, and the judge sentenced him to 180 days in jail, a $10,000 fine, and 10 years of probation, far less than the possible 20-year prison maximum, a decision that sparked debate nationwide. Brent had already stepped away from football in July 2013, saying he needed to deal with the tragedy and his legal fight. He was briefly reinstated by the NFL, but never truly returned to form, and by 2015, his NFL career was effectively over. Brent's story is a hard lesson about speed alcohol and the kind of split-second choice that can erase talent, friendship, and a future in one brutal flash. Cilento. Ricky Lamar Hawk, known worldwide as Cilento, exploded into pop culture in 2015 with Watch Me Whip, Nay Nay, a viral anthem that turned a teenager from Atlanta into a global dance craze. For a while, he looked like a symbol of harmless fun, award shows, kids' parties, and billions of streams. But behind that bright image, his life was unraveling. In the years after fame, Hawk faced repeated legal troubles and spoke publicly about severe depression, trauma, and suicidal thoughts, admitting that success didn't quiet his inner storms. On January 21, 2021, his cousin Frederick Rooks III, 34, was found shot to death on a road near Decatur, Georgia. Police recovered multiple shell casings, and surveillance plus location data pointed to a white BMW SUV leaving the scene. Hawk was arrested on February 1, 2021, and investigators said he admitted to the shooting. The case moved slowly as his attorneys raised long-standing mental illness as a major factor. When a former teen idol falls this far, do you feel shock or sorrow first? In June 2025, Hawk accepted a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty but mentally ill to voluntary manslaughter, along with related firearm and evidence concealment charges. In exchange, prosecutors dropped the malice murder count that could have meant life in prison. A judge sentenced him to 30 years behind bars. Family members of Rooks publicly argued the punishment was too light, while the defense stressed that untreated psychological collapse and fame's pressure were central to what happened. Cilento's story is heartbreaking because it spans two extremes: a joyful cultural moment remembered by millions and a violent ending that can't be danced away. It's a reminder that viral fame can arrive fast, but it can't protect someone from the consequences of a single brutal night. Lil Loaded. Deshaun Maurice Robertson, known as Lil Loaded, emerged from Dallas with a raw melodic intensity that connected instantly with younger rap audiences. Born August 1, 2000, he broke through in 2019 when 6A 6A6Y went viral, racking up tens of millions of streams and pulling him into Epic Records orbit. His music carried a bruised emotional tone, pain loyalty, survival delivered with a voice that sounded older than his years. By 2020, he had released projects like A Demon in 6 Lu, showing real momentum for a 20-year-old still finding his lane. That rise was interrupted on October 25, 2020. During what was described as a music video gathering in Dallas, Lil Loaded allegedly shot his close friend, 18-year-old Khalil Walker. Police initially sought him on a murder warrant. He turned himself in on November 9, 2020. As investigators reviewed the circumstances, the charge was reduced to manslaughter in early 2021, reflecting the claim that the shooting was accidental. Lil Loaded was out on bond waiting for his case to move forward. Before the court process could fully unfold, tragedy struck again. On May 31, 2021, Lil Loaded died at his home in Cedar Hill, Texas, from a self-inflicted gunshot wound at just 20 years old, reportedly after a painful breakup, and while under immense legal and emotional strain. His death froze the case in time, leaving fans wrestling with a complicated legacy, a gifted, troubled voice whose career and life ended before either could truly mature. Henry Ruggs III. Henry Ruggs III looked like the Raiders' future. Born in 1999 and raised in Alabama, he became a track-fast wide receiver whose speed felt almost unreal at the University of Alabama. In the 2020 NFL Draft, Las Vegas selected him in the first round, picturing years of deep catches and highlight plays. For a young man with elite talent, the road seemed wide open until one night turned it into a dead end. In the early morning of November 2, 2021, Ruggs left a late-night outing in Las Vegas and got behind the wheel of his Chevrolet Corvette. Investigators later pulled data from the vehicle showing he reached about 156 miles per hour and was still traveling around 127 mph at impact. He slammed into a Toyota RAV4 driven by Tina Tintor, 23, triggering a fire so intense she and her dog were trapped inside and died at the scene. Ruggs' blood alcohol level tested more than twice Nevada's legal limit. The Raiders released him within hours, and the city that had cheered him began mourning a life he'd taken. When you hear a number like 156 mph, do you think accident or choice? The legal fallout was swift. Ruggs faced multiple felonies, but in May 2023, he accepted a plea deal admitting to felony DUI, resulting in death, and a misdemeanor vehicular manslaughter count. In August 2023, a judge sentenced him to 3 to 10 years in Nevada prison with eligibility for parole after 3 years served. As of late 2025, he remains incarcerated and is expected to become parole eligible in August 2026. Ruggs' story is the brutal math of speed and alcohol, one decision, one crash, and 2 futures erased. Tintor's forever and his for a very long time. So what do we do with stories like these on Legends of Black Excellence? They aren't here to erase achievement, but they can't be dismissed as rumor either. In these 25 cases, some were convicted, some were acquitted, and some sit in the uneasy middle of self-defense accidents, addiction, or flawed trials. Does celebrity heighten responsibility or bend the system around it? When a life is taken and a career survives, should we separate the art from the act? And if redemption is possible, who has the right to grant it? Tell me below. Where do you draw the line?